When we first formed NAPDS, the only thing that really existed were the NCATE standards for professional development schools. And they were pretty exhaustively done. Marsha Levine did a great job of circulating the country and developing standards. And you can still see that their publications for NCATE standards are still around. One of the issues was school sites, and universities in particular, found them fairly cumbersome to use. If you've ever gone through an NCATE review or now a CAPE review, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So there was some difficulty in using them. At the same time, coincidentally, in the country, there were schools who were partnering with universities, and as soon as they made the partnership, regardless of how sophisticated, they called themselves a professional development school. So there were lots of PDSs that were not really PDSs, and there were schools who were actually PDSs but didn't call themselves such. So the organization felt a little pressure to define what was essential. And that's how Karen and I got invited to New Orleans to a summit where they brought together, this is Bruce Field and Roger Brimley, brought together about 50 people, school people, university people, to talk about what the just the essentials were to define a professional development school. And there was deliberate representation by AACTE, by ATE, by NNER, who sent people who had been doing partnership work for a long time to have this discussion.
Well, and I'll jump in here. One of the things that I thought was so powerful, first of all, I knew nothing from nothing, my left elbow, about professional development schools when I went to that summit. But someone asked me if I would go represent the school district that I worked with. And so I was happy to do that. And I learned as much from the summit as I think perhaps I contributed. But what came out of that was, for me, was a real understanding that these partnerships have to have some commonalities between and amongst them. And so it kind of leads to our discussion today. Are these standards? Are they suggestions? Are they guidelines? Are they essentials? And are they still the same as they were 10 years ago when we went to that summit to try to not only identify the essentials, but then what do they look like? What does it mean when we say we have, memorandums of understanding, for example? What does that look like? How binding is that? And do we need those formal structures for our partnerships? And so we spent a great deal of time talking about each of the essentials and trying to flesh out what those look like. I think in the last 10 years, people use them, but you don't have to use them if you're a PDS. We think they're important, but how important are they in the field? How are they being used? And do they need to be adjusted in some way? All that work we did a long time ago I think was fabulous work, but it's been 10 years. And so how's the landscape changed over the last 10 years? And are there other things that we could do on behalf of our membership that would help them in the field on a day-to-day basis improve the quality of their partnerships? And I don't know about you, I retired from a public school about 5 years ago in Texas, but I've stayed involved with the association because I believe so strongly in the work that we're doing. I want to also be able to make sure that we're doing smart work, that we're improving constantly. When I worked for a public school district, the partnership was my responsibility on the school district end, and I had a university friend, someone like Bernard, and we worked really well together to forward the partnership. I think there would have been tools and processes, perhaps, that we would not have had to invent the wheel in Waco, Texas, those years ago. And I think there are probably ways also that we could improve, enhance the essentials, and maybe make them more user-friendly, more integrated into partnerships. And so that's really a kind of where we are, where we used to be, where we are now, trying to make sure that what we're telling people we stand for is really what we still stand for.
I don't know what would be helpful. At the time we were trying to provide a definition. It was a lot like sausage making. 3 days at the Sonesta Hotel in New Orleans, not a bad place to meet. But there were lots of arguments, and the reason Karen and I both learned a lot was because we wrote down positions that people brought from all over, from various perspectives from all over. And that accumulation of data about what was essential was taken by Bruce and Roger and Elliot Nesson, and they were the ones to really winnow down these 9 essentials. There were things missing, we thought, but we're only looking for essentials. There were things that not everybody could agree with, but we eventually came to consensus. So that's how we really got this. But I will tell you this. If you read the beginning of this, you can see that the PDS essentials were supposed to be thought of as dichotomous. They were present or they weren't present. They were not designed to be thought of as continuous, like to what extent is your MOU terrific? So now it may be time to rethink that, but the essentials were originally designed not as standards, but as essentials. You either were this or you weren't this. Just because that was the imperative of the time. They were asking us for a definition. And you know, I could go on and on, but I'll stop.
So last year at the conference, we had a focus group session where we brought folks together. We had 41 participants in that session. And we broke into smaller groups and we posed a variety of questions, and we found these emergent themes from those focus groups. So the first thing that came out was how are the people that were in that room using them. So a lot of people were using them for assessment, even though, as Bert pointed out, they weren't really designed to be an assessment tool. They were used to guide the creation of new partnerships. They were used once a year by steering groups to evaluate how the partnership was going. They were looked back upon when they had a problem and they needed to reference it, so for problem solving. Some people said they used it in grant proposals, and a lot of people said that they used them to guide the writing of their memos of understanding. When we asked about how could they be better used, people said, we'd like to see examples of what they look like, which has kind of led us to coming together with all of you today. That there needs to be common language. That what's going on with CAPE? Is CAPE going to undermine this and create a whole new set of PDS standards? And if they are, NAPDS should be involved in that. Do we need rubrics? Some people wanted rubrics that we could use to actually measure, instead of seeing if this essential exists or doesn't exist, can we really rate it in some way? And then we got some caution. Don't over-design or revise them too much. Then we talked about relevance. Are they still relevant after 10 years was the question. And people had said, maybe there should be something more about P12 student achievement. Other people said, keep them broad and general. More emphasis on research-based practice and inquiry. More emphasis on professional learning communities. And then the caution, don't get too prescriptive. They are still relevant, they just need some tweaking. So you see, we've kind of got viewpoints from both ends of the spectrum. And then the last one was about recognition and endorsement. One of the ideas that had come up at prior meetings was, should the NAPDS get into the business of saying, we now endorse your school, you are an official endorsed NAPDS PDS partnership, and you could put up a sign that says that for a period of years. And then there was some fear, is that too much like an accreditation process? So some people said, yeah, that would be good. We would like that. That might help us have more credibility in our community, in our state, or with grant writing. So this is where we kind of are right now. This is the work in progress. These are the suggestions we have. And we'd like to continue to fine tune this. So I will turn this over to our next group who is going to help facilitate some discussion. And then we will come back together and talk about next steps after today.
Okay, so we're going to elicit your help with this. And we're going to use these 4 tables here. And so those of you that aren't at those tables, you can self-select where you'd like to go. Just stay put for a minute. And we're going to have 4 different rotations so that you'll get the chance to go to each table and give us input on. We've put 2 essentials at each table except one of them. One of them has 3 because 9 doesn't divide evenly. We couldn't divide number 9 into quarters.
Maybe we should get rid of
Or add another one,
Or
who
add
knows?
a 10th one.
So, what does the questions we'd like you to think about as you rotate to each of those groups. First one is, what does the current essential mean to you? Does it need to be refreshed or revised? If so, how? And then what supporting resources could benefit NAPDS membership about those essentials? So we'd like you, as you're at the table, to find somebody who's willing to be your recorder. And then as you rotate, that person doesn't necessarily have to stay as the recorder, but could, somebody else from the group could take over. What I'd like to open up the last 15 minutes that we have together is to talk about what's been impactful in the conversation that you've had today that has shaped some of your thinking. And so if you, do I have a volunteer who would?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I have just learned as a first-year teacher in the PDS program, since we just adopted it, it's given me a greater depth of understanding on the 9 essentials. And I've learned just from listening to everybody, the importance of the memorandums of understanding, the importance of, just having everybody on board with the concept. So it's just been an awesome conversation.
Great. Any thinking stirred up in any of you? I know we had some great conversations here, but
I've been at this table with Essentials 3 and 7, and I think the thing that I have noticed from the groups that I've been with is that some of our problems are the same, but different people have unique ways of addressing those. And that is one of the things that I think is so important, and one of the things that I hope comes out of any future work that this group does is developing a way to share. So I just met Gary, he's from BYU, and he was talking about a professional development research project and how they do that in their district, and how the university faculty collaborate with the P12 faculty. And it just sounded like, I heard angels singing, because I would have loved to have had something like that with when I was working for the district. And so exemplars like that, even if it's just stories, this is how we got our faculty to collaborate, and it took the part of the leadership, the whole works, but just those kinds of things, because as he was talking, I kept thinking, holy cow, we could have done X, Y, Z, we could have taken it we could have done, oh my gosh, I wish we had thought, so my mind was just whirring with ideas. And I think that's how, if we can share these kinds of thoughts with each other, this is how Essential 3 looks in practice, or this is one way we found it to be successful. And then make sure that our folks know that those resources are there, because I think the power is in spurring other people to think.
One of the things that I think we all face, and I was thinking about it in terms of the commitment piece, because we can have formalized structures, we can write down our bylaws and our agreements, but there's change, and people change, and leaders change. And I was thinking not long ago, we have a very wonderful partnership with a governing board of 5 superintendents and a dean, but superintendents come and go fast and deans change. And even though you may have a written agreement, I think you've got to really work to build those collective commitments all over again and consistently. They go on and on. You could come back and say, we've got this agreement, and somebody may say, well, we want out of that agreement or whatever. So there's just a real need to stay focused on building those relationships and making sure there's an understanding of how the partnership or the professional development school collectives work and what the benefits are. I don't think you ever get out of that kind of work. The ongoing need to support and recognize the value that comes out of that. Because if you don't, somebody at some point comes and says, I'm tired of that, I don't want to do that anymore.
One of the things that at least I realized so we worked on Essentials 1, Mission, and 5, making our work public. But the sort of the broad understanding I think I have is that the 9 essentials still work in terms of generating a conversation. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient, because what they don't say is what we stand for as an organization. So I'm thinking it now as this is my NAPDS board hat. So we haven't really taken any principled positions. We've just said, this is a PDS when this happens, when this happens, when this happens, and then we left it to interpretation. I think this is the fight, I'll be honest with you, the fight that the original conveners had. Because I think the prescriptiveness of NCATE is what pushed them to do this work, to make them usable, but that they didn't want to overstep and take any value positions. But one thing Bob said when we were talking earlier is that whether we like it or not, schools are never neutral. They're not. They say something. And that's the same thing I think we want for the organization. NAPDS is not neutral. It's not just sufficient to meet the 9 essentials. There's something more that we want to do and we'd like to do, and that means taking a more principled stand on very specific issues like justice, like fairness, and so forth and so on. And maybe we could be the organization that talks about the purpose of schools as being more than just test scores and babysitting and instrumental kinds of ends. But we need a soul here, and that's not captured in the essentials. That's what I'm thinking.
I think one of the things that this has done for me is reaffirmed several things that I know, which is that relationships matter and they're at the heart of what we do. It's also reaffirmed the fact that this conference provides a space for us to interact with different people and engage in really meaningful conversations. And I have felt nothing but comfortable and collegial that we can push ideas and we can share differing opinions, but still wrestle with ideas and concepts. And to me, that is what is so important about PDS. And so I'm excited by the ideas that came out and how we can use these ideas to, rethink the 9 essentials or enhance them in some ways that will keep pushing these conversations forward and keep pushing our work forward to continually advocate for what we know to be really good, high quality, not just teacher preparation, but education at large for all of us.
And hopefully can push us as an organization, as you were saying, which I think is really valuable for us to not just be a clearinghouse of PDSs with various different definitions, but what do we believe in? What's really important? So we appreciate everybody taking time and coming to our session today, and we'll keep you posted, as Michael said, as to if you're interested and have signed the sheet. And thank you again. Have a great day. Thanks.